If you're looking for the easiest legend climb, I've got you covered. These are the top 5 decks in order to help you go from the diamond ranks to the legend ranks. And if you end up copying one of the deck codes in this video, then you might as well hit that sub button because we're just gonna go ahead and jump right into it. We're gonna start with Bucket Shaman. Now I should preface this by saying that I have already made a top 5 decks video of the top 5 decks in Legend, and those are all decks that you could take from the diamond ranks to the legend ranks, but for this specific video, I wanted to focus more so on like budget players. I wanted to focus on like the typical meta you'll experience at the diamond ranks because it is very different than what you would encounter at the legend ranks. So some of the top legend decks that I've already talked about are already available in that video, so I'm gonna do my best in order to not talk about any of those decks in that video since you can always reference it. You can have some very similar results, just know that the metagame may not be 100%, good for those decks that I suggested in the legend video. So let's go ahead and talk about what I'm going to recommend for you to play at Diamond through Legend in order to help you finally get that legend card back if you have not gotten it. And we're going to start talking about Bucket of Soldiers, because I actually was able to reach Legend with this deck in particular. Now granted, Nostalgia Shaman is getting a lot of attention right now, but if you want to go all the way in the evolved direction, then this is one way that you could definitely go about it. And honestly, one change that I might make to this is I might put in a second copy of Muck Pools over the second copy of the matching outfits. But the general idea of the matching outfits is that you can play the Sea Giant, then play the matching outfits in order to get 2 copies of the 8/5 Reborn minion for DK that is 11 mana. So that is one, interesting utilization of this card, but more times than not, you're probably going to utilize your Muck Pools. So I would actually recommend this version of the deck right here rather than using double matching outfits, and the code will reflect, the double Muck Pools, but you could always make this decision yourself depending on which direction you really want to take the deck. But one thing to keep in mind about this deck and why we run Bucket of Soldiers is to enable the Wave of Nostalgia, so that way we can buff up the bucket with a card like Trusty Companion, but most likely the most consistent way that you can utilize the bucket is to play this on turn 4 or turn 5, and then on the next turn you can play Pop-Up Book into the Wave of Nostalgia, and that is actually 7 minions that are possible whenever you decide to utilize this combo. So if you have 7 minions versus your opponent like 2 minions, go ahead and pop off the wave. It's a pretty useful way of just scamming a game by just outclassing your opponent with gigantic minions. And speaking of gigantic minions, you have Sea Giant and Zilliax in order to make your small minions into a very large threat. So there's actually a lot of gas going for this deck. But if you don't like this particular version of the build, keep in mind that my other video does talk about Pirate Shaman as well as the top tier Nostalgia Shaman, and those will not be in this video. So we're going to continue talking about decks that I believe you will definitely encounter around the diamond ranks. And the deck that you're going to be seeing a lot on your legend grind is going to be this budget Elemental Mage. Not necessarily because it is the best deck in terms of power level, but it is the best deck for the price. This is probably the best, cheapest deck that you can make right now, to where if you don't want to spend that much money, but you want to have, really good results, you can easily hit legend with this deck. And even though it's not all too common at top legend, it actually does see play at top legend. So that is a very good indication that I believe that Elemental Mage is a very strong deck that you could definitely take into the legend ranks. And honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you guys, depending on the balance changes and how effective this deck is, I might attempt to do a free-to-play legend grind with this particular deck in mind. Now again, it depends on the balance changes and what happens in Hearthstone these next couple of weeks, but I really wanted to give it a try. So we're gonna see if maybe I take this deck all the way from a free-to-play account all the way to legend. So just believe me when I tell you that it's definitely possible. It just might take a while. And the next deck that we're going to talk about is actually Pain Warlock, and I gotta show off my signature Vona. Hopefully this will be, good one day, party planner all the way, dude, party hardy, but as of right now, this card can only really see utilization within the Pain Warlock archetype. And in all honesty, you don't really need this card. You could run literally anything in its place and it's probably gonna be fine. I don't really have any suggestions right off the top of my head, but put any damage card into this deck, it'll work absolutely fine. But the whole point of this deck is in typical Painlock fashion, hit yourself a whole bunch of times with cards like Flame Imp, Mass Production, or Party Fiend. You have Spirit Bomb, which deals damage to you. You have Souvenir. Oh my god, like almost every single card manipulates your HP except for Trolley Problem and oh my god, almost everything in this deck is either, wanting you to be damaged or actually does damage you. So that's just kind of an indication of how good Pain Warlock is right now. But the biggest thing that is bringing this deck behind is actually the nerf to Molten Giant, because a lot of people won't think about what their opponent's out are to deal 8 damage. They're just gonna focus on summoning a Molten Giant. So don't fall, don't fall victim to an opponent bursting you for 8 damage in order to steal a game from you. Always be aware of what your opponent's potential are, because you want to stay just outside of that threshold. And remember, you can always wait to play the Giants, so that way you can play them for 0 mana and then follow them up with an Infernal, so that way you can really utilize this card in the best fashion possible. So be aware of your opponent's outs, replace this card if you can't afford it, because it's really not that important, and Pain Warlock can easily get you to Legend in probably a couple of days. Next up, we're going to talk about Pirate Demon Hunter, because I actually owe Brain Masseuse an apology. I can't believe it, but apparently this deck is popular enough to where this is showing up on the stats now. Demon Hunters are now going all the way in the aggressive route to where they are literally playing Arana, so that way they can play a 1-mana 2/4 Pirate as well as Acupuncture. So yeah, this deck is just going all in on killing you as quickly as possible. So if you end up getting AoE'd or you have some lifesteal that you encounter, it's probably going to put a gigantic wrench in your game plan of winning, because, any healing can kind of knock this deck off of its high horse. But if you have a strong enough early game, then they will not have time in order to throw out those lifesteal options. So if this is like, say you're like a dad or something, you got like kids you gotta watch, or you just want to, watch Netflix or something while playing Hearthstone, play a simple deck, this would be my recommendation, because this deck just does its thing, and if your opponent does anything to counteract you, then you're just like, well, I concede, I go next game. It was turn 4 anyway, so I'm not really losing anything, because I'll get another quick W. So yeah, Pirate DK, if you want some quick games, that's the way to go. But just remember, quick games does not necessarily mean quick wins. And next up, we have free-to-play Rainbow. Now, this is a joke. The reason I make this joke is because this Rainbow DK does everything it can to slot as many legendaries into the deck as possible. So this is, one Rainbow DK that I wanted to show you guys that I don't believe is the best version of this deck, but it utilizes a lot of fun cards, such as Eliza Goreblade, the Headless Horseman, Marin for drawing 0-mana cards. Yoxaron is kind of a fun card depending on how exactly you look at him, but he's also just a really useful AoE option to help you remove your opponents off the field. And then obviously you're going to run Zilliax and Rezka because they're very core to Death Knight and in general. And Gorgon Zormu definitely deserves a spot in here because it gives you more corpses. For 5 mana, essentially, you get 4 corpses in the very early stages of the game, which is very impactful. So yeah, Rainbow DK is extremely fun right now. This is very similar to how the deck used to function with Runes of Darkness and a couple of tempo removal cards, so your big minions can do a lot more. But honestly, I think the slower curve of this deck that I suggested in the previous video is technically a better deck, so go ahead and check out the previous video going over the top decks in Legend to get that list. But if you just want to play this and have some fun, it has, a lot of different tools available in this toolkit. Some of them might be a little bit outdated, but can you really go wrong with a hell yeah? Can I get a hell yeah in the comments? In fact, that'll be my thing at the end of the video. Put a hell yeah in the comments so I know that you're actually watching all the way through. And we've got 2 other DK decks that we're going to be talking about, and the first one is going to be Unholy Aggro DK. I say aggro and I immediately want to follow it up with Paladin, especially when I see cards like Nerubian Egg. But this deck has kind of gone all in on not just running Death Rattles, but also incorporating the Plague package, to where I kind of shit-talked a deck earlier this week that only ran 1 Tomb Trader, but this is a list that actually runs 2 of them and runs a decent amount of Plague cards. It doesn't run Hell Yeah, which I'm still kind of confused about, but I guess as an aggro deck, you really don't want the game to go on later, and that's exactly what Hell Yeah is for, and why it's in Rainbow DK and stuff. You don't really want to put this into this deck because we're not going all the way, I guess, with the Chain Guardian, even though I did just say this does go all the way with Plagues, so just ignore that part. But yeah, since we're not running all the Plagues, we don't need the Hell Yeah, we don't need the Chain Guardians, we are just running the aggressive tools, so that way we can play a 1-drop weapon, we can play a good 3/2. If we can Death Growl, then that's plenty of Plagues going into the deck. We've also got, Yelling Yodeler to double up those Plagues if we need to. But we've also, got plenty of egg value. We've got plenty of Death Rattles that summon stuff onto the board or help you maintain a sticky board, such as cards like Brittlebone Buccaneer. Giving a friendly Death Rattle minion Reborn, extremely powerful, especially when you get a bunch of other Reborn minions and you get a bunch of corpses. And that's why Grave Strength is in this deck, because it is just a solid win condition that is essentially Bloodlust, but a little bit better. So yeah, that's one way you can look at Unholy aggro DK. There's not really a lot of other ways of exploring the Unholy archetype as of right now, so unfortunately you kind of just have to go all in for aggressive tools and plagues. And the last DK we'll be talking about is Frost DK. Now I have to say, I have not tested this deck myself, but I almost have this deck entirely golden. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna upgrade this to be golden, and we're gonna upgrade this to be golden, and we might as well just upgrade this to be golden, because why not? Bam, now I've got a completely golden, oh wait, I'm still missing some cards. Wait a minute, did I not put it in? Oh, I see what happened here. I didn't actually put the cards in there. How dare this dastardly game try to steal my money and not give me a completely golden Frost DK. Sorry, but I've only had one other fully golden deck before in the past, and it was Nature Shaman, so I apologize for flexing. But good lord, dude, do I just absolutely love a good DK deck, and Frost DK has been kind of lacking recently. So it's good to see this deck emerge, because this is actually a very good deck to play probably on your way to Diamond, and then you'll hit like a little bit of a rough patch on your way to Legend. But the reason I'm gonna suggest this deck is because Frostworm Fury will simply just lock out most of the aggro archetypes that you will experience on the ladder. Now, Pain Warlock is a little bit of a bad example, but I'm going to use it because it fulfills the role of the example here. But let's say you have a gigantic board that your opponent has, and you're going up against the Pain Lock, and you just play Frostworm Fury to their face, and now they can't do anything because their board does nothing, and they're just a sitting target just waiting to get either hit again by another Frostworm Fury, or you could just win automatically with that 5/5 hitting the enemy face. So there's just a lot of ways that you can just completely dominate and destroy aggro decks with the freeze mechanics, because you also have cards like the draw option, which, oh my god, the draw option doesn't even make it into this deck. That is absolutely crazy. Yeah, somehow Slippery Slope isn't in this deck, and this is what I found like after, you know, utilizing some data and checking out some of the websites. So I just found that kind of interesting that it's not in this list. So it's all in on aggro, just going face, playing minions, and then killing people with either Marrow Manipulators or Frostworm Fury. So yeah, apparently this deck doesn't need card draw because it just kills you fast enough. And next up, we're gonna talk about Elemental Rogue. Oh no, Lamplighter, this card is so toxic. I absolutely hate Shadow Step. How dare we let Elemental and Rogues, you know, somehow be good together? I'm gonna drop the act. This deck is fine. This deck doesn't need to be nerfed. If anything, Lamplighter is kind of an example of how, you know, if we nerf things on the first week, then we end up killing cards that absolutely have no reason to be destroyed. And I believe that a lot of people overreacted to how Lamplighter was going to rule the meta, because Elemental decks are not good at top Legend. There is a reason that I am putting the Elemental decks and only 2 of them in this video, because they really aren't that good. Elemental Shaman, not really that powerful. Elemental Priest was a bit of a meme that we've been, you know, bringing up just because I like the idea of talking about other weird techs. But Elemental Rogue and Elemental Mage really are the only elemental decks that really are that good that can actually get you above the Legend threshold. So it's like, I don't think this deck needs to be nerfed. And I recently responded to a Zeddy post, and I actually looked at the statistics for a lot of Rogue decks, and there's almost no Rogue deck that has that good of a win rate, not only in top Legend, but in regular Legend and through Diamond through Legend. So Rogue is in a very weird situation to where the top players are able to play like Mining Rogue and this deck and play it very well and, you know, get some good results. But the results of this deck are very, you know, all or nothing. You're getting a lot of wins, you're getting a lot of losses. It's very streaky, unfortunately. So it's like, the other cards I should talk about in this list to kind of, you know, sell you on the idea of this deck are cards like Sweetened Snowflurry, for example, because I think this is a great way of supporting the elemental archetype within Rogue, because you really need cards to keep you alive, and with cards like Preparation, it's extremely good to use that with the random frost spells that you get. But to be honest, I'm not that sold with, like, you know, Tar Slimes, Flame Revenants, and like Rolling Stones, for example. Obviously, you need some card draw, but I would just rather focus all in on only good cards that help enable the combo. And Elementals do enable the combo and give you like a way of playing for tempo, but I don't know. I'd rather just focus all in on the shit aspect of the deck and just summon Zilliaxes with 1 mana, you know, Sonya possibilities. And I don't know. I just feel like there's a better way of playing this deck, but this list that I'm showing you right now is actually a list that I got from my friend Dabs, who is currently sitting at top 20 Legend by primarily playing Elemental Rogue and other OTK decks like Concierge Druid. But he primarily was playing Elemental Rogue. Those are his words, not mine. So if he's lying, then I do apologize. But regardless, this is the way to play Elemental Rogue. I don't think Lamplighter needs any kind of nerf whatsoever, and Rogue is honestly one of the more fun archetypes to be playing right now, one of the more fun classes, because it's not oppressive. It's really not that bad in my opinion. Next up, we're gonna talk about Insanity Warlock for one main reason. Tidepool Pupil is a card that I knew would be fantastic because it just goes in so many decks, and well, when you have yet another 0 mana Crescendo that you can play thanks to this guy, it's a lot of damage that you can generate out of nowhere. Honestly, I feel like the main reason we're not seeing this deck a lot more is because people are kind of bored with it, and also it just doesn't work very well against like the Concierge OTK Druids, unfortunately. But keep this deck on your radar, because if things get nerfed to the point where Druid's not really alive and not really, meta relevant, then this deck could easily, be the next king of Hearthstone after like a balance change or something like that, because Insanity Warlock is really only brought back by all the aggro and druid decks. Now, it can deal with aggro in some situations with like, the right lifesteal, the right pop guard into crescendo turns, but unfortunately there's way too much aggro and there aren't enough really good matchups for Insanity Warlock to really justify doing this. So if you want to play this deck, just be aware the meta might be a little bit volatile against you, but in the diamond ranks, you could very easily climb with this deck just because of how easily it can stomp aggro. Just, you gotta be aware of when that lifesteal really matters. And the 10th deck that I have on this list, or the 10th archetype, or whatever, honestly, I haven't really kept track at this point, is gonna be Zilliax Deluxe Warrior. Now, granted, this was my honorable mention in the previous video, talking about the best decks at top legend, because I still believe this deck has some good meta relevance at the top of the ranks, but this is definitely a deck that will absolutely dump on any, newer player, any aggro deck that can't deal with multiple Zilliaxes. I believe that this is still a very effective deck to climb into Legend, but just be aware that some of these games will just feel like non-games because you'll get run over by like an aggro Demon Hunter that has the perfect draw and you didn't draw any of your armor cards. You just hit nothing but like really expensive cards and you're just sitting there with a big target on your chest. So yeah, Warrior also isn't looking that good on the stats, but I feel like a lot of people are not utilizing Warrior's win conditions to the best of its ability, but it is a very hit or miss deck because it's either you play the chemical spill on turn 5 for Zilliax, or you suffer because you never get this combo and you just don't have enough life gain. So it's kind of funny how this deck is like enemy number 1, like we have to kill this deck, we have to nerf Zilliax, but the numbers for this deck really are going down in terms of its win rate and its popularity. But I'm still gonna put it on this list because it destroys the diamond ranks. It's still one of the best warrior decks to play if you want to grind from the diamond ranks to the legend ranks, but just be aware that once you hit legend with this deck, it's probably gonna be time to let it go because it just doesn't really perform unless you have very specific matchups that you're trying to queue into with this deck. And the last deck that I'll talk about is Hunter, and I hate to say it, I'm kind of just giving Hunter a bone here because I have not seen this class be in the situation that it has been in a long time. Hunter is in such an unplayable state to where there's really only 3 actual decks you can play, and they're not even that good. There's this deck right here, there's Zoo Hunter, there's Highlander Hunter that I will talk about because I'm gonna give Reno a pity bone because I'm throwing it to Hunter, so it's kind of more of like, haha, look at how bad you are, Reno, I have to put you in here because there's nothing else that you're good with right now. I'm pointing at Reno and laughing at him. There's like Reno Druid, there's a Highlander Warrior and stuff like that that's available. But to be honest, Reno decks and specifically Hunter decks are just not that good right now. So yeah, Hunter, if you want to win with it right now, this is about the best way that you can go about it. Just playing typical Zoo, play a bunch of minions and play Saddle Up. Very effective combo there. There's also Secret Hunter that you could play. But I don't have a list for that because I'm gonna be honest, I think Secret Hunter is just complete bait. Like, I don't know how that's the best Hunter deck, and I feel like it's just the best Hunter deck because lower ranked players don't know how to play around secrets and they just throw games unnecessarily. So yeah, Secret Hunter, Zoo Hunter, and one of the only times that you'll ever see a Highlander deck in one of these deck videos, because until I see a good funny Highlander deck that does something gimmicky, which really they don't exist outside of like Hodir, Replicanator, Deckhand Hunter, that was really based and really cool, gotta give credit to that. But generally speaking, this deck is just meh. I don't really know how good it is, but there was someone that actually played Highlander Hunter and had a pretty successful win rate. Granted, I did just pull this deck from HSReplay, so I don't know if this is the archetype. But like I said, I'm throwing Highlander Hunter a bone right now. I'm throwing Hunter a bone in general because this archetype and this class is just so bad. So I'm kind of using this deck in order to just shit on it. But yeah, unfortunately, wait a minute, this deck doesn't even run Reno. And keep in mind, I don't have Reno in my collection. Highlander Hunter doesn't run Reno. Okay, I actually found the one Highlander deck I'm allowed to play because it doesn't run Reno. I thought I broke my pact, but it turns out I'm still 100% baby. I'm still Reno's biggest hater, and this card will never, ever see play in any of my decks ever again. I'm Reno's biggest hater. What can I say? I hate this card. But there you guys go. Those are 12 different decks that you could take from the Diamond ranks to the Legend ranks very easily, as long as you don't play the Hunter decks. Gotta be honest with you, man. Hunter's in a very bad spot right now, and if you want to play some of the other aggro decks like Nostalgia Shaman or Aggro Paladin, go ahead and check out the previous deck video, because those decks are still absolutely fine to get the Diamond. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I wanted to showcase some other archetypes in case you guys really just don't want to play the top of the meta. Because who wants to play Aggro Paladin? Let's be honest, right? Who wants to play any of those decks? Who wants to play Hand Buff Paladin? Am I right? But in any case, if you end up copying any of these deck codes, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to be notified about our next video, where we'll be talking about my top 5 picks for the most fun decks in Perils in Paradise. So thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you for the next video.